you came up with 7 different skills that you need to come up with to be effective as a millennial at work. And
Right.
so these are, I assume this is your distillation of what you found to kind of marry these two. There's millennials who feel a
Right.
certain way and managers who feel a certain way. And you came up with 7 things: build a relationship, ask for details, see the big picture, know when to focus, go for feedback, be accountable, and recognize your value, all of which is in this book. So millennials out there, if you want to know more, read this book. And
It's the secret to life.
what?
It's the secret to life.
It is. It's the secret of life. All right. So what I found interesting, there are several times that you talk about building a relationship as being one of the core things that millennials had to do, and that their managers had to do, right? Because as you described it, there's a problem. Each of you has your biases. You may not be communicating in ways that are helpful for both of you. So build a relationship was the first one. So I want to talk to, so if a millennial is like, whatever, should I build a relationship? Why should I care? What, why should, what's in it for them, right? Because that's the, what's in it for them? Why should they even bother doing this?
Well, I think I'm often asked by managers first, right, to
Right.
say, okay, now I know that and I'll tell them the people with the most responsibility in an organization have to be the first to adapt. Okay.
Right.
But I say to millennials, if you want more responsibility in your organization, be the first to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
And so these skills are adaptive skills to help them to overcome the perceptions in the workplace. So let's look at build a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I contend is that millennials are the first generation who has not needed an authority figure to access information.
Yes, that's true. That's a really good observation that you notice in your book. And that's a huge thing that millennials don't even realize. Like the access of that they know of what's happening in their company, in the world, it's altogether different than it used
Yeah,
to be.
absolutely. And so if you don't have a felt need to access an authority figure, you don't develop that skill set. And
Right.
so the point that I make in the book is that culturally, they've grown up in a world where authority figures they perceive to be for them. They're built-in relationships. And it's not that they've made a great effort for those relationships. It's authority figures have come around them, teachers, coaches, and mentors to say, I want to help you get to where you want to go. And what happens is when they transition from college to work, it's culture shock because it may be the first place they meet an authority figure they don't perceive to be for them.
Right, absolutely. And I'll just share with you as a parent of 2 millennial children. What happens is they have teachers who are like, "What can I do? What can I do to support your learning needs? How do you learn? Let me adapt my style to whatever your learning style is." I didn't have any of that. It's like, sit down, get in the chair, write down my notes. I don't care if you're learning or not, just do it, right? But all the way from when they're in kindergarten all the way to high school and then hopefully proceeding in college, your professor, even the questions that they ask, my son's now applying for college, your questions are, can you work with the professors? Are they there to help support you, right? Are they
Right.
just on the tenure track or are they there for you? Like it's a very different, I never asked any of those questions.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to, but they have like they're raised with this kind of and you mentioned this in the book, like a very customer support oriented where they're the customer and they're supported by all the institutions that they've been raised by, right? And then they go to corporation. It's like, what? You want me to what? But you
Yeah.
work for me.
Yeah, exactly.
You're
Exactly.
yeah. I'm the customer you have to please. What? I have to please you? What? It's a huge shift, right?
Yes, absolutely. And there's that baseline expectation that their voice matters.
Right. And it doesn't. In corporations, because the cultural biases that you're talking about, right? Especially, I see this in certain industries more than ever. You need to actually pay your dues before we listen to you. I did this, the person before me did this, and you will do it too. And so if you're a millennial, like, why do I have to do that? Because my friend who just graduated and created a startup is being heard. So why do I have to go through all this rigmarole when other people my age are not going through
Yeah.
this hoops,
And you're
right?
right. In some industries, it's more pronounced in others. And you can look at, for instance, med schools right now. There's just tremendous unsettledness about residency programs and having to adapt them and change. And there's just tremendous tension. I have a client that does veterinary hospitals where they're younger vets. There's a real tension with the older vets and the expectation of what their career will be like, what they'll do. Engineering firms where you had really 2 decades of a slowdown in hiring. So now you have a population that's mostly baby boomer and millennial. You don't have the middle Gen X there as the relationship broker.
Wow.
Attorneys, law firms, you'll see this, where it's been steeped in partner culture, and you're going to do these things or else you don't become partner. And these new minted young attorneys are coming out saying, I don't want to be partner.
Right.
So
they're breaking the whole rules of the game.
Exactly.
Like we came in, when my generation came in with a set of, here are the rules of the game. You work to me as a slave, so to speak, and you do kind of grunt work, and then like if you put in your dues, you will actually get paid longer term. And so now millennials are like, what is that game? I'm not playing that game. I've been playing video games where if I do a certain number of things, I will be rewarded, But now you're telling me I have to do all this for this long? Like, no thanks. Like, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, or even the reward. I don't want it.
Right.
I want something else.
Right.
And so that's where this whole thing's been kind of turned on its head. And the cool thing about millennials, and this is why I say we have to have a conversation with them, not about them, is it like, let's take the one law firm I worked with. So I said, if partnership's not working and that carrot's not working, what do they want? So they came up with a plan for if they work so many hours, millennials would get pro bono time to work for the charity of their choice.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant, right? Because then they get meaning in their job. So I'm not being a lawyer just to help,
Exactly.
propagate some corporation and their evil desires or whatever they may think. I'm there to help some nonprofit and help them, whatever.
And think about it. Okay, so previous generations, and a lot of people from previous generations that do nonprofit work waited to the end of their career.
Right.
Millennials are saying, I'm not waiting to the end of my career to help society out or make a contribution.
Wow, that's fascinating. Okay, so why should it matter for relationships? Going back to one of the things that you had in your book that I think was interesting is that the millennials who do cultivate relationships, if they decide to be in an environment where they have to work with people of older generation, then the reason why they do that is because they'll be able to get promoted more quickly, correct?
Well, not the reason why they do that. I'm saying that the ones who do that, the ones who know how to build relationships upward to authority figures, they're the first ones that get noticed. They're the first ones that get promoted. And if you think about it, we promote people we feel like we can communicate with because then we think we can trust them. And so what happens is those millennials that have that skill set, they get promoted quicker and move up faster. And it's not that they're smarter or better skilled at other things. It's just simply that they know how to build that relationship. A great little anecdote I have to tell you. So I love to golf, and I'm on the practice putting green one day, and there's a 12-year-old, his name's Daniel, in the club, and he's practicing putting. He's going around the green, and he's stopping, and he's talking to people, stopping. Finally, he gets all the way around the green to me, and I said, Daniel, are you practicing your putting? He says, no, I'm practicing talking to adults.
It's a skill, right?
Yeah. And I thought, oh my God, I want to invest in this kid right now to see the value. But seriously, CJ, it's interesting. I can go do an onboarding event where there's 120 young professionals newly hired in the room. I can walk through that room, and there's going to be about 10 to 15 that are going to spot me. I don't look millennial. And they're going to walk up, introduce themselves, ask me who I am, what I do. Those are the ones, if I were to track their careers, I'll guarantee you the first ones that get the conversation from me.
Okay, so for a manager, like, why do I have to be the one that's adaptive and flexible and build a relationship with them first? They should be doing the other, currying my favor, right? So from the manager, what's in it for them? Why should they do this?
And there you have the deal. The baseline expectation of a manager is that younger worker is going to come up to you and take the initiative. And you referred to it earlier. The way I talk about it when I'm keynoting is to say, my generation, the only way you had upward mobility was to find somebody with experience and suck up to them.
Right, exactly. Kiss
and
some butt. That's the way we all did it. Why don't you kiss some butt?
but it's true.
Right.
So that manager sitting back waiting, going, hey, now it's my turn to
Yeah.
be here.
Yes.
And they've got to come and do that, and it's not happening. And managers go, and here's how they interpret that behavior for the millennial audience. When you're not approaching your manager and not initiating that relationship, they think you're disinterested in your job, or that you don't think they have the competency level to have that discussion or to help you, or that you know more than they do already at your age.
Right.
And that's not what millennials think, but that's how that behavior gets interpreted. So that's why I like to say,
Right. It hurts my feelings. I've been a vet or a doctor, and I have a lot of tacit knowledge that I got from hard-earned experience. Why aren't you asking me about that, right? Like, it hurts our feelings as managers.
And you know what?
I think.
I love the word you just used, and it's what I say all the time to organizations. And what we have right here, this whole dynamic, it's a threat to the transfer of tacit knowledge.
Right. It
Because
is.
If you don't have a relationship, tacit knowledge, that knowledge that's not written down, that knowledge. And so that's what I say to organizations. I don't know if there's a greater threat to most organizations than the loss of tacit knowledge walking out the door. It's their greatest investment, and it's what they should be paying attention to. And if we have a disconnect in generations, then it's not going to get transferred. I'll give you a great example, okay?
Yeah.
So I'm working with an oil field company, and I'm doing management training. And you know, when you survey an audience, you know who's into it and who's not into it. And so
Right.
this cowboy sitting over on the side, cowboy hat over his face, and his boots propped up on the chair next to him. And on the break, I walked up and I noticed he was probably toward the end of his career.
Right.
And I said, "You're not into this, are you?" And he goes, "No." He says, "I tell you what our millennial plan is here." And I said, "What is it?" He says, "Well, see that hat?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "We each take $100 and we put it in the hat, and the first one that runs them off gets the hat."
So they're trying to scare away millennials?
Yeah, right. And so then
That's not helpful.
right. I said, "No wonder I'm here." So I said, well, I said, "You know, how much longer you plan on working?" He goes, "Probably, you know, I'll be 65 in 3 years and I'll retire." And I said, "Have you ever thought maybe you could transfer what you know and make somebody else a great salesperson?" Because this guy happened to be number one in his company. So he took me up on the challenge, and I tracked with him for a couple of years. And sure enough, he was able to take a new hire and take him into a top salesperson. And so in this dialogue with him, he said, "You're not going to believe this." He said, "My whole career I've been afraid of losing my job because I didn't have a college education. I've worked my way up from the bottom." He says, "Now I want to retire, and my company has created a special position for me to help other people like me better understand how to work with millennials."
Love it. Love that. I love
See,
that.
Hey, and that's where the shift has to take place in a part of our workforce to say, if I share my knowledge, if I take this initiative, it's not going to make me less valuable. It's going to make me more valuable.
Right. You know, I just was working with a company. It's Steve Troutman Company, and they do that. They actually enumerate the skills that you actually need in order for you to transfer the tacit knowledge of someone who has been doing a job forever. It's so critical, especially what they're finding at this company is for people who are technical in nature. They really need, they're complicated, very complex tasks that you only learn through a period of time, right? Yes,
Yep.
I could probably learn to be a veterinarian at some level at school, but there's a whole bunch of things
Right.
that you only get through experience and tacit knowledge. So I love it. Okay, so I want to talk about one of the ideas that you have in the book to go dive deeper into this building relationship. So you talk about it's really important that that you put yourself in the other person's shoes, and you actually call it a perceptual position. So there's millennials who are going to be looking at their own needs. There's managers who are focusing on the needs of other. Like if you actually put your perceptual position into the needs of others as a millennial, then you're putting yourself in the second position. And the third, which I call a meta position, where you're looking over the whole scenarios. You're looking without judgment, without, dispassionately, neutrally looking and saying, here's basically what's happening. Here are the societal, there's like a no fault policy, right? Right now we're all pointing each other, it's your fault. No, it's your fault, right? Instead it's like, No, come on, people. These are just trends that are happening in society. Once we accept what is and we move forward, it will have a lot easier over time. So I want to hit each of these perceptions. One is millennials who you said are saying, hey, and you said these map to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I completely agree with. They're saying they have needs that at the workplace, and you talked about a couple of them, meaning, but what are their needs with respect to connection? How do they see it?
Here's the funny thing, and this alludes back to what I said earlier.
Yeah.
They come in with the expectation that the relationships are already built. So
Oh, right. Okay.
and so that's why that doesn't show up for them as a big thing.
Right. This is
Because
an institutional way of working, which it is not. So there's like
right,
first misunderstanding.
yeah, I mean it's fascinating because who is it? Tom Rath wrote Vital Friends. It was a Gallup poll on friends at work, right? And so the studies show that a person that feels like they have a friendship with their manager is 2.5 times more likely to stay at that organization. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
So millennials come in with the expectation that they're going to have a friendship built in with their manager that isn't really a result of any kind of behavior
Right.
activity.
I earned it already.
Exactly right. Hey, you're here to help me. And by the way, I don't. It's just the way it is. It's their
Right.
world, and so you can sit back and go, they shouldn't be that way. But that's really the world that they've grown up in.
Okay, so then let's take the perception of their manager. So if I focus, I'm a millennial, I'm thinking about my manager's perceptual map. What is the needs of the manager that are happening that I may not be aware of? I think that there's like a built-in institutional, like connect with me thing. That's not happening. What's happening for my manager?
I think if you're a millennial and you look at the manager and try to understand their behavior, here's a good example. Okay, so a manager of a fast food restaurant, and he's got high absenteeism, the worst
Right.
in his company, and so we're talking. I said, well, why don't you put the scheduling in the hands of the millennials and the people who were not showing up for work?
What? Right.
He says, I can't do that.
They can't even show up to work, and you want me to give them the
Yeah,
hands to like give them
well,
the keys to the castle? Forget it,
no,
right?
it's better than that. He said, he says, I can't give them that responsibility. That's how I punish people.
Okay.
So, but here at the end of the story, here's what happened on the millennials' part is putting themselves into the position of manager, the second position, right? Is that absenteeism went down because they owned it, but when they came back to them, they said, we never realized how difficult your job was. It's impossible to please everybody. So,
Aw,
but,
that's
here,
nice.
but yeah, here's the deal. Millennials come in, and one of the perceptions is they're myopic, that all they see is right here, and they're not seeing cause and effect, which is called systemic thinking. Once you expose them to systemic thinking, in other words,
Their own systemic thinking, yeah.
right. And so when you say to them, no, I can't give you this weekend off, because I just can't, and you don't explain and connect it to say, well, this is going to impact this, impact this, impact this, impact this, and just say, I'm your boss, just do what I say, that's what turns them off. Mm-hmm. But they look at these opportunities really to kind of learn. And so in that case, by being given the scheduling, they were able to put themselves into that second position and have empathy for their boss.
Right, that's the thing. One of the skills, seeing the big picture. Right, they're able to see the big picture. Like, wow, this is really hard, and this is a requirement that's needed to have a successful retail organization. Right. I get it, right? So they understood the consequences of not showing up for their job. Okay, on schedule and everything. All right. It means so much to me that you're listening to the show and love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.